Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, no, let's get right into it. So I really am I'm a big fan of you guys, and I think as I mentioned, housing is politicized right now. We are seeing this in all the articles in California going back and forth
Mm-hmm.
with all the housing bills, and the cities and the municipalities are fighting for local control while the state is coming in. And so there's both sides of this argument. And just so the audience knows, yeah, we're just really just coming at this viewpoint very objectively, right? There's no
Mm-hmm.
pro or yay stance here, but you can still,
100%.
present some of the points for each side and see where we are at,
Mhm.
right? Like what it is. So I want to get into um, the first topic for us is, I mean, we're going to talk about the AB 2011s and the
Mhm.
SB 35s and all of those bills that really speak to infill multifamily, right, in the cities.
Mhm.
But I want to talk about Senate Bill 9. I really want to get kind of your
Yeah.
thoughts on that because I know that's been a bill that has, I want you to share multiple iterations, and it had predecessors to that bill, and then that passed.
Mhm.
For us, it was just, it was a point where we took a pivot for brickwork, and we highly just focused on SB9 for the past year. So yeah, if you could kind of
Yeah.
share your thoughts on it.
Oh, 100%. And to first touch on the point of iteration, so actually to prep for this, and because obviously, engineering, I have to look at the numbers and the statistics behind everything.
Yeah.
So what I did was I pulled a lot of the data that we collect, or just the massive catalog of data that we have on Abstract regarding legislative information,
Mhm.
dating all the way back to 2007, so the '07 '08 session. And I was just very curious to see, we headed into the California legislative scene when housing was already a super, super big topic, and it was one of the bigger ones, to the point where the level of sides is basically more than two-dimensional, if that makes any sense. Just
Right.
reading through the bills and everything, there's, within the Democratic supermajority, there are YIMBYs and NIMBYs, for example. And then
Yeah.
um, as we get into the insights that I found about SB9 and a lot of the other bills that we're going to be talking about, even at the city versus state level, there's sides that people have taken there. And
Yeah.
it's just very, very interesting. So what I basically did was I pulled two specific figures from all the sessions dating back to the 2007 and 8 one.
Yeah.
And I saw basically the total bills, housing related bills, and then out of those housing related bills, which one were actually chaptered, which means, signed and fully gone through the legislative process. And in 2007 and 8, 9 and 10, and 11 and 12, we kind of see the similar numbers where housing just isn't that massive of a deal. So across all three sessions, the total housing bills make up for about 1 to 2% of all introduced legislation in each of those sessions.
Yeah.
And out of those 1 to 2%, about between 32 and 44% are actually chaptered or passed.
Right.
But when you boil them down to the quantities, that's about 29 bills in '07 '08, 28 bills in 9 and 10, and then 21 bills in 2011 and 12. However, something happens between the 11-12 session and the 2013-14 session where um, in the 13-14 session, out of 4,800 bills that were introduced, 929 or 19% of them are actually related to housing.
Mm.
So something happened in that session that maybe you can shed some light on because I'm kind of an outsider to this whole housing scene, but yeah, we just have a massive influx of introduced bills related to housing. And since then, for the sessions in the past 10 years, the number has just kept growing. So we went from 19 and 13 in the 2013-14 session to 20, 24, and then with this past legislative session, it was 25. Um, so, this one specifically, the 21-22 session, as we're about to see, is definitely one of the more consequential ones. And there was a lot of very cool data, like data points that we picked up on that I just love, love, love to get into.
Oh yeah, I love this data. And again, I had remarked before, I love when I have engineers on, right, and digging deep in the data, 'cause really
100%.
that's where you get a lot of insight. So not a lot of people want to
Hmm.
focus on that, but that's where a lot of the information is. But yeah, I think
Hmm.
my thoughts on that also during that period is that
Hmm.
I think that was around the time that I think there have been more, the homeless issue, the unhoused issue has always kind of been around in LA and
Hmm.
California in San Francisco here over a lot of years. But it was more profound then. I think there were a lot of articles, and you were, and it's just what you see out in the streets where it started to get compounded, right? And so I know
Yeah.
now everyone's used to these tent shelter,
Mhm.
kind of cities in their own all over, right? Under the freeway passes and, in Venice Beach and Santa Monica and all of that. But, 10, 15 years ago, there weren't, right? So I think it
Mhm.
started to get and build momentum where we know and recognize it was a problem. And so that was putting pressure, state level, city level. What are we doing
Mhm.
to deal with this, if that makes sense? So,
Exactly. Yeah, and I definitely, you mentioned you were based in San Francisco, and I'm based in Los Angeles, and that's, I can't drive 5 minutes to a nearby, grocery store or anything like that without seeing those encampments. So, having lived here for 7 years, I've definitely noticed the increase of them. They're way more frequent
although
now, and
we're based also in LA, so we see the same
oh, no
thing
way.
coming downtown.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Awesome, awesome.
SB9, we're gonna get into infills, and I really, I want you to really give us also kind of a real world example of users that come to your platform on
Mhm.
this, because I think that's such a value. So we're seeing this is where
Mhm.
we want to drive a lot of interested stakeholders and parties your way, because so brickwork high level, hey, you want to
Mhm.
build housing in your property, that's what we do. And so it could be a single family lot and you want to build ADUs, or start to go, well, what does SB9 mean? Can I split the lot? Can
Mhm.
I put duplexes? And then on the info route, it's like, oh, can I really build 200, 300 unit apartments, right, in Culver City or whereabouts? And so we help do that. But everything is tied to all the inherent zoning. That's just
Mhm.
use case number one. And then you have all the overlays in the cities, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, that has been passed
Mhm.
over decades, that are still in place, that are still that you have to address. And then there's all these layered state housing bills. So there's even more need for abstract. There's more need of
Mhm.
education, condensing that information, where those bills you guys, I know, are reading through. But
Mhm.
what is the takeaway from that, if that makes sense? Like so condense it down to like these bullet points. What is the intention? What can it can't do? And so,
Mhm.
that's why I see extreme value in abstract, by the way. Like you guys, yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're kind of in that role where when we get like an SB9 report, right? I want to kind of still touch on this, is there are developers that have been building like on the west side or all these other different neighborhoods in LA
Mhm.
for 10, 20, 30 years, and
Mhm.
there's 1 year in, I still have conversations with them where they're just like, I still don't think you could do that, John. Are you sure?
Mhm.
Where in I'm like, I'm sending them the LA implementation memo. I'm like, it shows it right here, and here's the
Mhm.
state bill, right? So I'm trying to put two and
Right.
two together, and they still can't wrap their heads around. I'm still not going to jump in until I see
Mhm.
more like concrete evidence that you could do it, right? So
Exactly.
how would you address those kind of issues with a user that wants, kind of like a summarized, simplified explanation of, say, even Senate Bill 9, SB9 or thereabouts?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one of the main selling points behind abstract is we give you a full um overview of the bill, in addition to some foundational data that a normal, like, everyday government affairs person would go through.
Yeah,
So to
yeah.
the everyday person, say if you're a real estate developer, for example, and you want to understand the rules that or the at least the legal framework that you want to operate in between.
Hmm.
Um, Reading a 100-page, 700-page, 200-page bill with a grotesque amount of
Yeah,
amendments and changes
yeah,
and that type of stuff, it starts getting very overwhelming very quickly.
I agree.
If you don't understand legislative language or anything like that, it just gets very confusing. So we worked with a lot of people who are on our advisory boards, who are industry veterans of the government affairs space, as well as you know, going out and just getting a pulse of what's going on in the legislative industry. And we really wanted to understand, okay, you obviously don't have the time to read through an entire bill. So
Yeah,
at a glance, what would you like to know about it?
right.
Um, and what we noticed was whether it was a lobbyist who just cared about housing bills or a lobbyist that cared about agriculture bills
Hmm.
or a state agency that cared about this specific policy issue, it all boiled down to a single pattern of the timeliness behind it, or like the timelines, the lifespan, the different versions, and then more specifically, outside of the legislature related to that bill, what's happening, who's
Right.
taking stances on it, who's
Mhm.
working on it, that type of stuff.
Right.
And that's pretty much what we've built in terms of an initial page that you can use to view a lot of these bills.
Mhm.
One thing that we offer as well is a public view of those bills. So I can actually, hopefully, after this, send you the link that we have to SB9, and you could just see everything on there without needing an account. Um, but the one thing that I think I might be biased because I know we put a lot of work into is the selling point of that last point that I mentioned, which was showing you what's happening to the bill outside of it. And our biggest kind of project that we're kind of slowly but surely iterating on right now is committee analyses and then showing you who's taken a support versus opposed position on the bill.
Right.
So,
That is very important information, actually.
oh yeah. So